Welcome to Compassionate Care Conversations. My name is Scott Bradley. I'm the owner of Bradley & Son Funeral Home, serving Morris, Union, and Essex counties in New Jersey, and SimpleCremationNJ.com, which serves the whole state of New Jersey. I'm a third-generation funeral director, clinical social worker, and a certified psychoanalyst. My mission here is to speak with people who improve the quality of life of the traumatized, the dying, and their stressed caregivers. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Richard Squires. He's the Chief Creative Officer of Narra. I feel this strong connection with you since we both help people tell their stories so family and friends can celebrate a life well lived. So can you tell us about yourself and how you settled into a career inspiring people to tell their life story?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. This is exciting, and I've known you guys and Austin for some time now, a number of years, and I'm very happy to be here and to tell you about my story. So I was like a born storyteller. I just was always easily captivated by stories. Movies at first, just obsessed with the movies. And then I went to college. I studied literature. I was in high school. I got into creative writing. I was writing poetry and stories and always, interested in people and their stories, including my friends. And always, I think just, my mom is a very sweet woman, very kind of empathic. And I think I got that from her. So I always can understand what people are trying to say. I can relate to them, and I always felt that. So I studied, creative writing and literature, and then I got out into the workforce and had a variety of jobs, most predominantly corporate communications in pharmaceutical companies. And originally I wanted to work in film, and I did that for a bit, and there was a strike and this and that. I ended up in publishing for a little bit, and then I went for a master's degree, and somehow just kind of ended up spending years in corporate communications. And my soul was certainly not in it. I was always just craving more creative storytelling. And so I went for a second master's degree. My first one was in literature. My second one was in creative writing. And that was 2012 to 2014. And in 2014, as I was finishing and I was thinking to myself, I have these new skills. I feel really confident in my abilities as a writer and a storyteller. What am I going to do? I don't want to go back to corporate communications. I have to come up with some idea to do what I love and be authentic to who I am, and at the same time, provide for my family. And it was at that time that my grandfather asked me if I would write his memoir.
No.
And immediately it was like a revelation, because I grew up listening to his war stories. He was in World War II. And I knew what story I would want him to tell me first. And it was about the action that he saw, that I grew up marveling at these scars on his leg. These like 3 scars that went across, just running my fingers over them as a little boy. It's one of my earliest memories. And he would tell me how he would go out in these missions, and the enemy would shoot up these projectiles that when they hit a certain altitude would explode, and they'd send out flak, which are little shards of metal. Right. And on one occasion, it destroyed my grandfather's plane. It ripped the bottom off, and it hit his co-pilot in the head and killed his co-pilot. And my grandfather bailed out. He parachuted down. He landed in the Pacific Ocean, surrounded by sharks. There were always stories of men getting eaten by sharks. And you had to hope you weren't bleeding that much. And he got picked up. And that was the story that I first thought of. And then after he told me that, I started asking him all kinds of other things. Like I learned about my genealogy from him, ancestry. Our family goes back to Ukraine, at least his family does.
Right.
Really interesting. We found the manifests. My cousin Doug did some research on ancestry, the manifests of the ship. They had gone from Ukraine over to Germany, and they took the ship out of Hamburg to Ellis Island in 1888. He talked about growing up on the Upper West Side. He had a career in the meatpacking district.
Right.
Yeah, he did business with Paul Castellano, the famous gangster. And there's a whole bunch of stories there. And he met my grandmother and had kids and had grandkids, and we did the whole thing and gave copies out to the whole family. And boom, my first business, Life Story, was born.
I just hearing you tell that story feel enriched. I know this new person, and I could see why you would become a memoirist. Just the way you look so engaged in it. It's amazing. I think we'll get into you as a memoirist, but also today we're going to talk about your new business, Narra. And I wrote the question, what? And then I wrote, well, maybe it's better is, who is Narra? Tell us a little bit about Narra.
Yeah. So Narra is it's the next iteration, following Life Story. So with Life Story, I spent years writing memoirs for people the hard way, just interviewing them, editing their words, formatting their book. And I've written more than 70 of them, but I could never do more than 10 or 12 a year because I'm only one guy. I have some people who help me, but I have to ensure quality, make sure people are happy. So the question was always, how can I scale up? And now in the age of AI, I'm able to do it. So Narra is an app. And I'll just say, before I kind of go more into the details, I'll just say that our mission is to strengthen human connection and through technology, whereas technology kind of seems to weaken human connection and cause isolation. Yeah. We're the opposite of that. And how do you strengthen human connection other than just learning about each other and having experiences together and celebrating those experiences that we have together? And that's what Narra is for. So it's an app, and it is the easiest way that I know of in existence to write a book, because you don't have to do any writing.
Right.
It has an AI interviewer. So you call it, you tell it a story, it engages with you in a dynamic, warm way. I have created the instructions for this AI, and it interviews you the way that I would interview you. Right. And after you finish the story, right, and so there's back and forth, and the idea is, it's different, if you're just telling the story to a wall or a blank page. This is a conversation you're having, like you would with me, but you're having it with the AI. And then after you hang up, it writes the story for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a chance to talk with Narra. I went on your website. It's a very nice, simple website, and there's a phone number to call. You can call Narra. So I called her, and she seemed very interested in talking to me and hearing my thoughts as I spoke. What I'm curious about is, how does a person's sort of ramblings to Narra turn into a good story that's well told?
Yeah, it's really something. Again, so it's based on the way that I would do it. And if I'm sitting with someone and they're not a professional storyteller, they're just a regular person, they're telling me the stories, I'm asking questions, I'm getting the information. Not all the information comes in the right order. Sometimes people repeat themselves. And there's also different sort of levels of cognitive ability. But you do the best that you can with the words that you're given and the story that you're given. And so in my experience, I'll sit there, and if I'm having trouble for the most part, it's usually pretty easy to understand what people are trying to say. Sometimes they don't quite say it, but I know what they mean. And I sit there, and if I'm having a little trouble, I give it a little more time, and I usually figure it out. If I just can't, that's kind of an edge case. And AI does it even better.
Wow.
Narra, yeah. So we have this one experience. My partner, Mia, she's the CEO. She used to live in Minneapolis before she moved recently back to the Philippines, where she's from. But we went out there. We did a workshop with some seniors at a living place. It was great. And then after we finished it, Mary came down from memory care. Mary has dementia. She also has a speech impediment. She stutters. Right. Very interesting life. Very beautiful. She had been a model. She talked about rubbing shoulders a little bit with like JFK and Frank Sinatra, and I just asked her. I got her talking. She was able to talk about her earliest memories growing up near Tufts University, and I could only understand about 70% of what she said. Yeah. But when Narra wrote the story, it was right on. She had her aide there, and her aide was like, "Yes, that's what Mary said, and that's her story."
Wow.
How did Narra do that?
Yeah, how? How does that happen? I mean, is technology, the way you wrote the code, how does that work? Do you know?
I gave it instructions. I think the people who invented AI are mystified as well. They somehow created something and it does amazing things beyond maybe what they could have imagined. I don't know this for sure, but it's like you can't, like, how does the human brain work? You can't explain it. It's just magical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's all these disparate people talking to Narra, which is amazing. We're going to talk more about this, but I am so, I guess, obsessed with the idea of talk, people able to talk. And you said it earlier about connecting and making connections, using AI to make connections as opposed to disenfranchising people and separating them. This is actually bringing them together. Can you give us some more examples of how a client's life's been improved through this service, just like this model? And also I was thinking the reader benefits. So it's a twofold win. You have the person being interviewed, giving stories, and then somehow it's going to turn into a book that you help create. But then the reader gets that. So tell me some stories about people benefiting from this.
It's a gift in both ways, and I've just experienced it so much with my clients. They all are, feel the gift, feel the benefits. First of all, especially if you're older, the world is moving fast, and people don't have the time to sit and talk with you and listen to you. And people who've lived life are full of lessons learned, wisdom, amazing stories, different times. I mean, there's so much we can learn, and it's just a gold mine that we, for the most part, overlook, and don't take advantage of. And so when someone, a senior knows that you are interested in them, and then it just is a delightful experience for them. It makes them very excited, and they come back alive and they want to tell their stories. So, for example, this one client that I had, Ed, he had Parkinson's, and when I showed up to meet him, they brought him out in a wheelchair, and he looked like he was sleeping. And I asked him some questions, and he started talking, and he gradually started to wake up. It was awesome. He picked up his head, his eyes were open, and then it was as though he didn't have Parkinson's, or that he wasn't so tired. Everything about him changed because he came alive, because he had a great time telling the stories of his life, talking about his childhood and his mother, in New Jersey, having cows, back when Jersey was a farm, and, his experiences in the Korean War and everything. And as a firefighter, he came alive. So, that's one thing. Another is that, it can be therapeutic, right? Talking, I mean, as you know, talking is therapeutic. And there's a big difference between trying to tell your story to a blank screen, or just to a wall, or just a straight Q&A. That's not a dynamic conversation.
Right.
These conversations are generative, and they lead places that you don't know where they're going. Right. And so this happened every time I talk with someone, and it happens with Narra too, is through the back and forth, you think of things you haven't thought about in a long time.
Right.
And you say things that you could not have predicted you would have said had you not had that live dynamic conversation.
Right. Being my psychoanalytic self, I will say Freud would love this.
Yeah.
This is just, open thinking. You're allowing people to wander through their minds wherever they're going at that moment, and then make sense of it through a story that's going to be written. There's books out here of all these people's stories. So these are the finished products of what happens. I have one more question. Since I didn't get to finish the phone call with Narra, how does it end? Say I make the first phone call, and so it's sort of motivating to call her again, and make the next call. How does that work?
So the way Narra works now, and it'll be different in the future, because Narra is still kind of, young. And it's funny, you're saying, is it an it or is it a she? I mean, when we're talking about the interviewer, we often refer to Narra as she because it's a woman's voice.
Yeah.
But there's all these great features that are on the roadmap for the future where you'll be able to change the voice if you want. You can pick a voice that works for you. And in the future, it'll actually be an app that you can find in the App Store. Right now, it's a web app. So you go to the website, but what you can do is you can save it to your home screen, so it actually has like the little icon there. So it really functions like an app. And it'll work a little differently in the future. But now, the way it is now is it's a phone call. When it's an app, it won't be a phone call. You'll just be in the app, and it'll be a widget. But now you make a phone call and you tell like one story, or maybe, you know, a group of 2 or 3 stories per phone call. Talk maybe up to 15 minutes. I like to say don't go longer than 15 minutes because we don't want to lose details. So you call, you tell a story, you have a conversation, you hang up, it writes the story. And then within the app, and I'm hoping that the audience is going to go and try it out because it's very intuitive to use. And you can create all kinds of book projects. So within the app, you have your individual stories, but you can create a book project. And within the book, you can create chapters. And within the app, we have different templates. So those are like pre-populated chapters. So you could do one that's the life story. And that has that's a pretty robust thing. And you don't have to fill every chapter, and you can delete chapters, you can rename chapters, but you could start with, your ancestry. You could go to your memories, your grandparents, your parents, your childhood, your education, if you were in the military, your love, becoming a grandparent, all the way through. And so you can call, you tell a story, and then after the story is written, it doesn't automatically go into the book. It's just in your list of stories, and then you can move it into the right book, into the right chapter. So you don't have to go in order. You can just, as you think of a story, tell a story, and then, do it for a while, and then go back at the end of the day or the end of the week or the end of the month and go through your stories and move them into the right areas. And it could be any kind of story, whether it's your life story, maybe it's a recipe book, maybe it's about your children's sports season, anything. It could be a reunion, and you just keep moving it in, and then you can look at what you have. You can reorganize things, and you can see where the gaps are.
Right.
Yeah. In the future, the Narra will say, "Hey, I notice you have a gap here."
Wow. That's so intuitive. It's really neat. Well, thank you.
Yeah.